Hi there, Mariette Martinez here, and this video is going to cover what is a budget? Why is a budget essential to profitability and growth in your business, and how to create a simple budget in just 3 steps. This is such a fundamental step in building your business and making sure that you have clarity and confidence on your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy this video, enjoy the free template that goes with it, and thanks so much for wanting to empower yourself here at Master Books. Bye for now. How to create a budget. Your business budget can be created in 3 simple steps. These 3 steps are forecast sales, allocate expenses, and plan for profits. And yes, I said plan for profits. So step 1, the budget, focus on forecasting sales. This is also referred to as building a sales projection. Let's go a little deeper into what that actually entails. When you focus on sales first, essentially what you're doing is you're listing out all the sources of revenue, also referred to as sales, that the business is either currently bringing in or estimates that they will bring in their forecasted total. So you look at your sales from, let's say, last year, or you estimate sales for this year, and that's what's included in your total sales. These sales can be based on a few ideas. For example, your prior period actuals. So it's as simple as exporting your profit and loss from the prior year. We're going to use the example of we are building a 2024 budget. Well, you would go ahead and export the data from your 2023 profit and loss statement, also referred to as your income statement, and you would go ahead and enter that data into the budget. You could also enter those totals into the budget on a monthly basis as well. You're doing this on a monthly basis. And if you're a calendar year business owner, then that would be January through December. But you can also adjust those prior period actuals. So let's say, for example, you're saying, okay, Mariette, these were my numbers from 2023, but based on these last 3 months of the year, I've been bringing in 1 client every month, 1 retainer client at $3,000 every month. So I definitely need to adjust my sales numbers for 2024 to add 1 more client. So 1 more client bringing in $3,000 a month. And let's say, for example, you also did some goal setting, because remember, you have to determine some goals before you start doing your budgeting. So then I ask you, okay, so is that what we're focusing on for sales? 1 additional client every month? And you'd say, well, Mariette, I said that that is on average how much I've been bringing in over the last 3 months, but absolutely not. My goal is to continue to bring in 1 extra client a month, and also to bring in this additional project that I want to do, which is going to bring in, let's say, an additional $2,000 a month. So actually, my projected sales is not only my actual numbers from last year every month on a monthly basis, but I'm also going to project an additional $5,000 a month, because a budget is projecting those numbers. Okay, you're projecting those numbers. So that would be an example of using historical data and then adjusting those numbers to derive to a new forecasted amount. So that's really important to understand, everyone, because some people think, so all it is just last year's numbers and that's it. Well, no. Remember that you sat down and you thought about your budget. You did some goal setting, right? Well, first some soul searching and then some goal setting. And because of that, you were able to come up with an additional $5,000 of estimated revenue. And again, this is not about feeling guilty or feeling scared or like, oh, but what if I don't make those $5,000? That's okay. We're projecting those sales. And if we have to adjust, then we will figure that out as we're looking at the budget versus actual throughout the year. And lastly, another example is that you can look at the patterns or trends of your business or even of your industry if you are newer to your industry or business. And you can also consider doing some estimated forecast of your sales in that way. So that's another way of doing it, because I'll have people say, but Mariette, I'm so new to my business. I don't really know what is the average amount of clients someone would get in my industry, in my business. Well, then we have to look at some common patterns or trends for your industry to be able to estimate those outcomes. Okay, so those are a few examples of focusing on sales first. Step number 2, allocate expenses. So, okay, we did our income. Woo! And by the way, you like to start with your income. Let me all tell you, you want to start with money in, because this is a plan for your spending. So can we just have a reality check right now? You cannot spend money if you're not bringing in the money. So we need to bring in the money first. We need to spend some time. We need to breathe. We need to dream and get excited about the money we're going to bring in. That's the forecasting sales step. And now we're like, oh, yay, now that I have money, I'm going to be purposeful to allocate my expenses, right? So now step 2 is about allocating your funds to specific expenses. Let's talk about that. We're moving on to expenses next. So now that we're moving on to expenses, we're going to list out all the expenses the business currently has. So all the expenses the business currently has, and or going back to the and or estimates that they're going to incur throughout the year. So if you, let's say, are in your second year of business and you were like, the first year, I absolutely couldn't go to a conference. The first year, I absolutely couldn't send my team with me to that program that I really wanted to, or have that retreat that I really felt would increase the morale of our company. But in the second or third year, I am going to budget for it. Congratulations. That's exactly what a budget is. It's your opportunity to purposely budget for your expenses. So you're going to list out all of those expenses that you either have or estimate to incur throughout the year. Now, when it comes to expenses, think about a few examples of expenses. They can be based on specific costs related specifically to an income stream that comes in. So a specific income stream brings in a very specific expense. Let me give you an example. When I launch a cohort, which are my long-term accelerator programs, which are between 8 to 12 weeks, I have very specific expenses related to that launching. I have to bring in a launch coach that helps me set up the entire program. I bring in, of course, my community manager, and she's with me for a longer length of time. We may have to bring in some graphic designers to create some new graphics for the entire program, for the marketing, for the sales, and even inside when I'm teaching, I always like to bring in new image and ideas. I bring in experts into my cohorts. So guess what? I pay my experts. Absolutely. So I have to remember that when I'm going to bring in experts, I have to account for the cost of bringing in experts into my program, because I'm not the only one teaching in my program. I'm bringing in other collaborative partners as well. So there's very specific costs that are related to my accelerator programs. Guess what? I also have what are called evergreen courses, which are courses that are available at all times. People could just buy them today, tomorrow. There's really no costs related to that are similar to my live cohorts, because those are ongoing experiences that people can just purchase. Really, the main cost to my courses that someone can purchase any day at any time is me. Another example are there's costs that are constant and consistent. Okay, we always think about that, because those are like your overhead costs. They're regardless of revenue generation. They're not associated with your revenue generation. They're constant and consistent all the time. So of course, our rent, right? Our insurance, our utilities. We have costs that vary based on time. So we're in a specific season right now. You may have additional costs that come up that are seasonal, that are cyclical, that are time framed based. So they're based on the time frame of your business. And there are costs that are based on the percentage of sales. So for example, if you say, I just created my budget and I want my cost to be a percentage of my sales, it's actually a method that you can do to, again, plan for profit. And if you say, okay, so let's say, for example, I am going to make $100,000 and I want my marketing expenses to be 10% of my sales. Okay, well, that's simple. $100,000, 10% of your sales, that's going to be $10,000 in marketing costs. So you've already allotted the marketing cost based on the percentage of sales. So that's another example of how you can list out those expenses. And step 3 is planning for profits. Planning for profits. So you can budget for a desired profit and or a desired profit margin when you're creating your profits. What I mean by that is, of course, at this point, again, the budget is showing your income or sales on the top. You went ahead and allocated those costs, expenses, okay, under the income that came in, the funds, right? Because you allocated expenses to your funds. And now you've reached your operating profit. Now, of course, like I said, you could have a loss, especially if you're in the startup mode, you may have a loss. But ultimately, your bottom line should be the total budgeted revenue minus the total budget expenses. And we are planning for this bottom line to be positive, which means we are planning to be in the black. So that is a well-known statement. Hey, are you in the black? That means that it's a positive number on the bottom of your profit and loss. Okay, you're planning for the bottom line to be positive. When the total is positive, the business is breaking even or growing in their profits. So they're breaking even or they're growing in their profits. When the total is negative, when it's in red, what's happening? It indicates that the business is in a loss position and it requires more attention to the budget. Okay. Unless you know that your business is going to be in the red, then you need to go back and look at your budget and say, wait, am I planning for losses? Why am I planning for losses? Again, if you're not a startup, then you really need to think about why your budget is showing losses, because you want to plan for profit. So let's cover a few tips to keep you on track with your budget. We start with reviewing and adjusting. Remember, I said there's a power in the budget versus actual method. So we're not just creating this budget and letting it sit there. No, we are reviewing the budget monthly and we're not afraid to adjust amounts based on new changes. Now, when it comes to adjusting, the adjusting actually happens on something that we call a rolling forecast, because the budget needs to stay the same. And you're basically looking at a budget versus actual to see what your monthly numbers look like. But let's say you're 3 months in and you're like, wow, my budget was quite off, whether it was quite off on the positive, or maybe you're making less than what you expected, or you're spending more than what you should. So if you're going to start adjusting numbers, you actually create what's called a cash flow forecast to start doing those adjustments. So that way you can truly see how your business is doing in real time. But the only way that you know that you can make those adjustments is by looking at a budget versus actual report. Also, for those of us that are like, okay, but where do we start? The profit and loss provides you the past performance already. All you're doing is pulling the activity from the profit and loss, also known as the income statement, and creating your first budget. That's the power in having real time, or what I refer to as tax ready financials. And last and absolutely not least, you got to give yourself the time, the space, and the mindset that your budget deserves. Your budget should be motivating. Your budget should be inspiring. It should help you reach your goals and it should inspire you to think bigger. And because of that, my friends, it deserves time. It deserves space. It deserves maybe taking a little private CEO retreat on some beachfront condo and just sit there and be like, okay, I'm going to have a budgeting day, right? And you're going to have that retreat and you're going to allow yourself to pave that path that you deserve towards profitability and towards prosperity. And remember that your budget is living and it's breathing. You're not going to just let it sit there, okay? Think about it as like a living thing. You don't just let it sit there. It's like a plant. It's like a tree. It needs to be watered. It needs to be nurtured So that way it can grow alongside you. And that's the power in being intentional with your budget. Okay, so let's see this in action. Let's see these three simple, 1, 2, 3 simple steps in action. Step 1, budget. So we're going to forecast sales. In this example, our sales are a revenue of $100,000. $100,000. Step 2, we're going to allocate expenses. Expenses of $90,000. $90,000. So let's look at it. Our sales are $100,000. Our expenses are going to be allocated to direct expenses of $20,000, operating expenses of $20,000, our own pay of $50,000, and that's going to leave us with operating profit of $10,000. Another way of looking at it, if we looked at it in percentages, our net profit margin is $10,000 divided by $100,000, which is we have a 10% profit margin. That's good. We want a positive profit margin. So is there a tool that can help? Yes, there is. Let's reveal the magic of the simple yearly budget. So the simple yearly budget is a spreadsheet that I created for all of you in Google Spreadsheets because I am a Google girl, okay? And it's a very simple created budget on purpose because I don't want you to feel overwhelmed at all. And I want you to feel eager and inspired and excited about the budgeting process. So there is always, as much as I can, and if it's necessary, I always try to have what's called a Start Here tab in all of my spreadsheets. So just want you all to know that. If there needs to be a little bit more explanation or detail, I have a Start Here tab so you can get the essence of what the workbook is. Now, of course, I'm going to teach it to you, so I don't necessarily need to go through this tab with you, but just be aware if you open up any of my tools, which are usually either in Google Spreadsheets or Google Docs, unless it's a fillable PDF, which are the three main tools I like to provide, you'll want to click on the Start Here. But we're going to click on tab A. So all of this should now look very familiar to all of you. Okay, remember step number 1? Step number 1 was to project your sales, also known as forecast your sales. So when you have those numbers, you would add them into this spreadsheet. Now, right now, I've hidden these columns because there are some people that like to just enter in an annual budget, and then what they do is they annualize that over 12 months. So they basically take the totals and divide that by 12, okay? I prefer that you actually open up the entire budget. So we're going to unhide this for a moment. And I prefer that you budget monthly. The reason why is that business is very seasonal. Business is very cyclical. So there may be months that the income coming in and the expenses going out are different based on the time of the year, based on the type of business that you have. So taking one total and dividing by 12 may not make so much sense when it comes to building out your budget. Also, remember that I told you that if you're starting from scratch and you have about a year worth of data, that you can just populate that data by exporting it out of your software into an Excel spreadsheet, or also CSV is the common format, and then populate it right back into this spreadsheet. And that would essentially be your simple yearly budget. Okay. Another concept of a budget is that a budget is very similarly formatted to a profit and loss statement, but it is not a profit and loss statement. Make sure you understand that. A budget is not a profit and loss statement, but it's similarly formatted to it. I say that because you're going to look at this and you're going to say, well, that really looks a lot like a profit and loss statement, Mariette. Well, because I want to teach people the concept that a budget is basically your income or sales on top, your direct costs after that, which brings you to what's considered your gross profit. Income minus cost of sales or cost of goods is your gross profit. Then you have all of your other expenses, okay, very similar to profit and loss. However, you can add amounts in a budget that you would not commonly see on a profit and loss. For example, if you are a Schedule C, you would not put your owner's pay on your profit and loss. Okay. That goes on your balance sheet because it's an owner's withdrawal of your profits. But when you are budgeting, you need to budget your pay. Remember that? You need to make sure that you're budgeting to pay yourself. You need to pay yourself. So if you don't have that on your budget, guess what happens? You forget to pay yourself. And then you're like, yeah, but Mariette, I have my profits. No. You're going to pay yourself. And then if you have profits, you're going to pay yourself out of those profits. Or maybe you're going to decide to do something else with those profits. Maybe you're going to decide to reallocate those profits, reinvest those profits, use those profits for something else. So think about that. Okay. In a budget, you can add additional line items that you necessarily wouldn't see on a profit and loss statement. Another example of that would actually be equipment, right? When you think about purchasing equipment, remember, equipment would actually go on your balance sheet, right? Equipment would not go on your profit and loss unless you're expensing it in the same year. But we're not worrying about your depreciation method right now, okay? We're just making sure that if you believe you need to invest in some additional assets or equipment for this year, it's part of your budget. Taxes. Yes. You need a budget for taxes, everybody. We got to pay taxes. We need a budget for that as well. So that's what's really important to understand, that even though it looks like a profit and loss statement, and I built it out this way specifically because it's easy for you to learn the profit and loss method and for you to export your numbers and just drop them in, because essentially that's what a budget looks like. But I want you to also understand it isn't a profit and loss, which means you can add additional lines to the budget. Okay. So that's the simple yearly budget, which again, you can look at it on an annual basis by just hiding those columns and just having a total column at the end and then dividing those numbers by 12 to get 12 months. Or you can do it on a monthly basis, which I believe is the best because businesses are cyclical and there's things that may change over the months of the year. Now, you have budget versus actual. Now, this is powerful, everybody. So a budget versus actual is basically your budget. And what you did is you added an actual column to this spreadsheet. Well, I added the column for you, and you're just going to use the method. So the budget versus method allows you to have your budgeted numbers, which would basically be all the numbers that you worked on here in your simple yearly budget. You'd bring them over here into your budget per month. And then every single month with your budget bestie being self-accountable as well, you would enter in your actual numbers. And that way you can see what's called the variance. So did you stick with your budget? Did you spend more than what you said in your budget? Did you spend less than what you said in your budget? And ultimately at the very bottom, what are we looking at? We're looking at operating profit and we're planning for profit. So on your budget columns, of course, you're going to have a profit number. But when you bring in the actual numbers, do you have profit? That's what you're looking at. And if you don't have profit, so let's look up here, you're comparing budget versus actual. And when you look at your variance, and if your variance shows that you are consistently not having profit, you all need to ask yourselves why. Why am I not showing profit? Okay, there may be a reason why you're not showing profit, but we need to be able to see that we no longer want to build a budget and then drive the rest of our business blindly because we don't want to look at the budget. That's why the budget versus actual method is so powerful. And even more powerful, 95% more powerful when you commit to do this with an accountability partner.